we learnt about all which one template driven forms. Template driven forms. We learnt about template driven forms, and in template driven forms we discussed about how to validate template driven forms and one more point, we discussed about various validation services. Validation services are classified into two types. We have form state validation services and input state validation services. One more point, we discussed about validation classes. Angular provides validation classes. By using these classes, we can easily apply effects based on various validation states. Now, next important, we have to know about the model driven, or we call them as reactive forms, or we call as model driven forms. Reactive forms or model driven forms. Now, what are differences between template forms and reactive form? The first important is reactive forms. Reactive forms are configured at the controller level. They are configured at controller level. That means entire form is configured at the controller level. Controller level means in the TypeScript level. So UI is lightweight. User interface is lightweight. So what is advantage is faster in rendering. Not only that, it is very easy to extend form and test form. It is easy to extend the forms, because if the forms are defined at controller level means class. At class level, if you are defining the forms, it is easy to extend. Classes are easy to extend. User interface is not easy to extend. So once you design a class, already we learned inheritance. We know inheritance. It is easy for extending the class. It is easy for event testing because it is clean separation between UI and controller. You can say view and controller. Clean separation between the UI, view and controller. That means the UI and logic. So form related logic is not present inside view. The logic entirely present inside controller only. So it is easy for extending the forms. For example, already I told you one example, like suppose we are uploading a file. While uploading the file, we want to upload a photo. Then we want more photos to upload. That means we must be able to dynamically add the controls. I will show you. Actually, suppose the form need to change regularly. So we are designing some form. Now in the form, we have some options. So like suppose we designed a form, and in the form we are configuring about basic details. basic details. Now here I given some address information. Suppose I given a checkbox. In the checkbox, so I am giving an option like, so your address. So address means we have a communication address. Communication address is same as current residence address. In that case, what you do generally is you will just select this checkbox. When you select this checkbox, then only same field will be used for both communication as well as current. But if you haven't selected this checkbox, then automatically another form will display. In this form, you must able to display the new fields where he can enter the different address. Now, the question is, in HTML, suppose we have a body. Inside the body, we are designing a form. This is form 1. And we are creating another form. This is form 2. Form 2. What do you say? Is this valid? Can we have multiple forms in a page? Is this valid? Can we have multiple forms in a page? You are thinking, huh? You can have, there is no problem. You can have any number of forms in the page. There is no issue. You can have a login, you can have register, you can have multiple forms in the page. There is no problem. There is no issue. So now what example I showed to you is inside this form, this form should add when they selected that my address is different. Now the point is, this time this second form must come inside this form. That means the form should come inside this form. What do you think? Is it valid? Is it valid to have a form inside another form? It is not valid. We cannot have a form inside another form. This is not valid. So you cannot have a form inside another form. That is not valid. But my requirement is this. I have a separate form to submit. For example, if you have seen Google account details or Facebook account details, you go to Facebook account details page. There they will give several categories: personal information, security information, so many categories will be there. Now all are related to account details. The form is account details. In that, if you want, you can modify only personal details. If you want, you can modify only security details, and you can submit only those details. I hope you have seen that. That means account details is the form. In account details form, you can update only the personal details and submit. You can update only the security details and update. That means, is it possible to design a form inside another form? In HTML, it is not possible. Then how you will satisfy this? Because we don't want entire form to submit. Only a specific portion of form to submit. For that, you have to depend on lot of Ajax things actually. by using Ajax, you can design dynamic forms. But very important is this form is not allowed. This form is not allowed. This form is not allowed. Inside a form, another form is not allowed. But what we can do is, we can use a HTML container. We can use a HTML container. And with the help of Ajax, we can use this container as a form. You can use as a form. That means with the help of Ajax, we can configure that container in such a way that only that container can submit data to any API. You can handle that by using Ajax. That means your form need to be asynchronous if it has to do this. And to create asynchronous forms, so form inside form is not possible, but we are creating pseudo forms. We call them pseudo forms, and with the help of Ajax. So what Ajax can do? Ajax can handle partial postback. Partial postback, that is the main definition actually. If anybody asked you what is the purpose of Ajax, if anybody asks you what is the purpose of Ajax, generally what you say, Ajax is used for partial postback. Ajax is used for partial postback. That means it will not allow to submit the entire page. It can handle the submission of only specific portion of page. Only specific portion of page can be handled. That's what we can manage by using this, right? So technically, when you are dealing with Ajax, that is possible. So what reactive form can do is, so it uses async methods. It uses async methods and allows to submit the form. It uses async methods and allows to submit the form or a specific portion of form. It allows to submit a form or specific portion of form. That is what the advantage of reactive forms. So that means reactive forms have a lot of features. So we can easily extend, we can easily test. It is cleanly separated from the UI. It makes the UI lightweight, as well as it is asynchronous. Asynchronous means only specific portion of the form can be submitted. That is possible with the help of reactive forms. Now let's see how we can design it, how we can work with this, right? 1 second, 1 minute, I will be back. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah. So the major advantage of this reactive form is handling asynchronous methods. Now here, to configure reactive forms, the classes required for configuring reactive form, we have the classes called form control. It is used to configure a control. We have form group, and we have a form builder, and we have the validators. Inside them, so many others are there. These are all the classes that are required for designing a reactive form. We will see one by one how to use them and how do we work with them. Now, very recently what happened is, very recently means just 3 days back, 2-3 days back, Angular 14 released. Angular 14 is ready. Now, just 3 days back, Angular 14, the stable version released. In Angular 14, they made some changes. Angular 14 made changes into reactive forms. So, which you cannot try until or unless you update to 14. Right, so I will show you at the end what is new in 14. In 14, they haven't disturbed anything about template forms. Template forms are as usual, no changes. Only reactive forms, they made some changes. What they have done is, Angular 14 made changes into reactive forms. So they added types to reactive form. They call it as typed reactive forms. What is problem previously about reactive form is, you design an entire form at controller and you bind it to the UI. Then when you are binding with the UI, in user interface, any name you have configured for the form, the controller cannot recognize that name. Lot of issues are there. That means actually what happens is, suppose you have user interface. In the user interface, you have designed a form, and form have some controls. So some have some controls. Now technically, when you design the form and the form controls, this form control is having a name. Suppose this is username. Now actually you are binding with in the controller. Controller is your .ts file. You are trying to access the form and username. Then here, if I even misspell user ID, something like this, then or some misspell name, then it is unable to track that it is not binded with UI. It is not binded with UI. That means now TypeScript will not show any error in this field. During compile time, it will not show any error in this field. During runtime, it will show the problem. Runtime, it will show the problem because at the runtime, UI is rendered. When UI is rendered at runtime, the name is recognized. And runtime, it is unable to map to the same name. Then it will show error. Due to that, of course, we can track errors, but we have to wait until the UI is rendered. But in Angular 14, they designed typed forms. They added new types. What is advantage is directly in the compile time itself, it will recognize. That's good. That means at compile time itself, you can identify what type of data that control have to handle. What is the name of the field? All these things are newly added. So that you can try from Angular 14 onwards. So Angular 14 is ready, but there are no major changes in Angular 14. They have made some changes in Angular material components. They have designed standalone components newly. Now Angular 14 newly comes with components. Later I will tell you. Angular 14 made changes into reactive forms. They created types. That means we call as typed reactive form. And another is Angular 14 introduced standalone components. Standalone components, right? Standalone components. These standalone components are good. They reduces lot of configuration that we have to give in app.module. For example, you have seen app module, right? You have seen app module.ts. In app module.ts, what happened? In app.module.ts, all the modules are everything configured. Modules, components, services, everything is configured in app module, right? So all are defined at app module level actually. Yeah, all are configured at app module level. Now what happens is, if you remembered, I told you a point that, if you remembered, I told you services. We discussed already services. Actually, service we are configuring in providers. Without configuring in providers, we can directly configure the provider at service itself. Am I right? Similarly, now you can configure imports and declarations in component itself. Imports and module, everything you can configure. That means this ng module you can define at component level. That means now what happened is, in the 14 we have component decorator. We have the component decorator. In this component decorator, what we were using earlier, we have a selector, right? We have template URLs and all, right? Now newly you can directly define imports here. You can directly define imports, and you can import form module directly here. You can import directly the form module here. That means now form module is not for all components. It is only for the component that you want. Previously what we were doing, we were loading the form module for all components. But actually every component may not require form module. In that case, now the form module is available only for this. For example, if you are using date picker, mat date picker module, you can directly configure here. You don't need to configure at application level. Directly, which services you are going to use, those services also you can configure here. Those services also you can configure here. So you can configure the modules, you can configure the services, everything inside a component itself. These are standalone components. These are new in Angular 14. Angular 14 stable release released just 3-4 days back, and in that lot of changes. The few changes they made into reactive forms and components. Some more changes are related to performance. That is not mandatory for you to know about it, but they are not major things. You don't need to know because they internally happen. But I will tell you at the end what are those new features added and how they work. So Angular 14 is ready. Angular 14 is ready, because if you create a new Angular project today, then Angular 14 will come. If you install Angular CLI now, then you will get Angular 14, not Angular 13. So that is updated now, right? So this reactive forms, we cannot see that. So that is here, yeah. Angular.io. Right, let's check this. Let it open. Yep, meanwhile we will see this. It will open, right? Meanwhile, we will run our project so that we can see. Yep, let's check into this. You cannot use them now. You cannot use this. You see here, still the stable release is 13.3 only. So because the new version of Angular is available, but only the point is 14 is available only for developers. Only for developers, so that you can trial as a developer and you can get it as a developer. So if you want to install 14, you can see now current 14 stable version is available. Mostly in 1-2 days it will be available for general usage also. It is already there, 14 is there, right? If you go into this, you will get the new things what they have newly added and configured into it. I will tell you, because we cannot use them. In order to use them, first you have to set up and install that 14 version. So initially we will not touch that, later we will see. But why we discuss that? Because our reactive forms change a little bit. Means configuration, everything same, there is no change, only the declaration change. They made little bit strongly typed for the forms. Right? Here we have two important classes. One is form group. Form group, it is used to configure. It is used to configure a form. That means the form element. Configure a form. And form control. Form control, it is used to configure. Used to configure a control. Control can be like input, or it can be like select. To configure a control, we have to use form control. So how do we design a form? So syntactically, first I will show you. To design a form, we need to configure FRM register. Suppose that is the form is equal to new form group. You have to configure as a new form group. Now in this form group, it contains collection of controls. So I want to design username. Username is a new form control. That means every form group contains controls, and this control contains value, what default value you want, and here you can define so what validations you want. Validations are defined by using validators. Validators dot, you can define validations like required or min length, max length, like this. Now you can design any number of controls like that. If you want a child form inside it, then you have to configure as some FRM address, that is a child form. It is again configured as a form group. It is again configured as a form group. And in that form group, again you can define the controls like city. It is a new form control. And you have to define the value and the validators. I'm just giving the syntax. Now this is nested form. You can design a form inside another form. Now the question is how this form is binded to UI. Actually, to make a dynamic form, previously what you are doing in the template approach, we have to define the name, you have to define an ID reference. Here, just you have to use a property form group. Form group is equal to, we have to just bind FRM register. That's it. And how to bind anything into a control? So to bind anything into a control, let's see. That means to bind any control, just we have to define input type is equal to text. We have to use form control. Form control name is equal to, that is user name. That's it. You don't need any ng model. You don't need any model binding methods here. Just you have to attach the control to this element. Now it is ready. It is dynamic. You don't need to write validations also here. You don't need to write required min length validations here. All are configured in the controller. You have to just use that here. Use that here. Now the question is, how you will use a form inside another form? Can I use another form? Not possible. Then we have to use a container. You can use a container and you can make it work like a form. what you can do is you can define form group name. Form group name is equal to FRM address like this. That means form group is used for parent, form group name is used for child. Now what is advantage? If you want, you can submit entire form, or if you want, you can submit only this form. In this, suppose we have a drop down. In this we have a drop down. Then I have to bind. Anywhere you have to bind by using form control name. Form control name is what? City. Anywhere control is form control name. So form group. So here you have three options. One is form group. Form group. Capitalization also matters. This is to form. So bind form. And we have form group name. So this is to bind child forms. Bind child form. In order to bind the child form, we have the form control name. Control name. This is to bind controls. Bind form control. To bind the form control, we have to do this. Now your UI becomes very lightweight. Your UI becomes simple. So your UI renders faster. Everything is defined at the controller level. And all these are the members. That means these are all the members of which library? Angular Forms library. From Angular Forms, you have to import a module called Reactive Forms module. Reactive Forms module from Angular Forms. This module is required from Angular Forms. In order to use all these form groups, form controls and all, you have to use this Reactive Forms module. We have to import that from the Forms module, right? So let's see how to design the form and work with the form. First step here, in order to design the form, right? I'll clean up this. So in order to design the form, first step is we will go to app module here. In the app module, already forms module is there because we imported that at the time of learning two-way binding. So we have a forms module and we need to import. We have to import another one. Let's pick up this and keep it modules place so that it is easy. So here we need to import another one. What is it? We have to import reactive forms module. Reactive forms module. You have to import that reactive forms module. And you need to register this and configure here. In the modules, you have to define another one, that is reactive forms module. Reactive forms module. That's what you need to specify. It's not yet saved. We will save that. Yeah. The reactive forms module you need to define here. Now it is ready to use the forms. It is ready for using the forms. After importing, now let's design a simple reactive form component. I will generate ng-generate component. And reactive form or reactive demo. Okay, skip this. Okay, so let's keep this in the startup. So in Bootstrap, I am defining reactive forms, reactive demo, right? Yeah. And in index, let's keep reactive demo. Okay. Now, how to configure a form? Let's see. We will go to the components, reactive demo component, and in this TS file, everything is designed, means configured in the level controller here. So we have to import. So we need to import. One is from Angular Forms library. From Angular Forms library, we have to import a form group, and we need a form control. Initially, we need these two. Now, how to design a form? So to create a form, actually, we are defining here FRM register. It is the form, and it is FRM register. It is configured as the type. That means you are configuring as a new form group. We are configuring as a new form group. In this, we have to define the controls. Suppose I said username, or just suppose I am defining, first we will just keep name. This name is a new form control. It is a new form control. It is a new form control. And the control contains only value. Initially, I will just configure the value. That means we are configuring the name and we are defining this value. Similarly, I have suppose price, and I am defining new form control, and the value is empty, like this. It makes it as a string type. If you want to make it as a number, then you can initialize 0 into it. Then it will be a number type. This is the problem earlier. That means the problem earlier is actually what people have in habit is they don't know what type of data comes here from UI. Because from UI, whatever you send, it is a string only. Because in UI, text box, checkbox, radios, drop downs, whatever they send, it is a string. Then we need to convert into numbers and manage them. Actually, earlier what people have to do is they have to make it null because they don't know what type of data initially comes. So if they are now, what we can do is now these are made as generic type. These are now made as generic type. That means you can say that it is initially null or later it can accept a string. This is not supported here now because it is still Angular 13. Angular 14 supports this. Or Angular 14 comes with a new option. You can create actually untyped form control. You can create this. In untyped form control, you can configure the data type. But these are not available in Angular 13. So in Angular 13, what you have to do, you have to use a form control and you tell what type of data is expected. Even you defined a number, if they send a string, it will not show any problem. When it will show the problem at the time of runtime. Runtime, it will show the problem. Compile time, it will not show any issues, right? So here, this is name and price. We will see about validations later separately. Initially, first we will learn how to design a form. This is a general form. If you want to create nested form, inside this form, we have to configure another FRM stock. FRM stock is a new form group. In this, we have to define here stock. Stock contains suppose city. So city I defined as a new form control again. And this is a string type. Okay. And we said stock. Stock is again new form control and it contains boolean true or false. This is how we have to configure a form. That means how we design a form and how we configure the form. So we are creating a form called FRM register, and to designate it as a form, we have to use form group. And we are configuring these controls inside the form. Now we need to define this in the UI. In the user interface, we need to configure that. So let's see. We will go to the reactive form HTML. We have to bind it here. So how to design? So we will create a container. Okay. And class as container fluid. Okay. Here we put so register product. And here we are configuring a form. Now to this form, we have to attach that FRM register. Then we need to just define here an option that is a form group. Form group, what is the name? FRM register. That is the form group. Now inside this, we have to define the form controls. I will create a simple data list, data term name. Here I have to bind. Then simply you have to use input type is equal to text, and to bind you have to use form control name. Form control name is equal to name. How you have to, now it becomes dynamic automatically. Now how you have to do this previously? You know previously in template form, suppose in template form if I have to design, what to do? Input type text, I need to configure as a model. I should give a name and I have to configure as name is equal to ng model. This is all we have to do in a template approach. Now you don't need to do all this, just control name. Suppose you are defining another data term price, and here we are defining input type is equal to text, and form control name is equal to price. You are configuring. Now how to design child form? You cannot have another form inside. That means HTML will not support a form inside another form. In that case, you have to configure as a container. Now this container should behave like a form. That is, here I will put a heading like stock details. Stock details, and this is to be acting as another form. Then we have to configure form group name. We have to use form group name. Form group name is equal to FRM stock. That means that is the child form name, right? FRM stock. That is the child form name. We have to configure that by using this. Now in this, I just created a div, and in this I just created a label. Here we defined as city, and another div here we just defined as, so we just configured as input select. We will use a select, and select is using an option some Delhi, select is using an option some Hyderabad, and I need to configure this select. And select is a form control. You have to mark it as form control name. Anywhere control is form control only. Whether it is in parent form or child form control is form control. What is it? City. Now what about the next one? Another one, we will create another div, and in this div we will define the label as stock, and the stock we will keep a checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox, and for this checkbox we have to bind form control name as a stock. We have to define this. Now this is stock yes or no we are configuring. This is how we design a multi-level forms. How to submit only specific portion of the form I will show you. We will see that. Initially, we will design a submit button here. We will put a button inside the form register. So this is a basic form we have designed, BTN primary like this. That is the basic form we have designed. Now localhost, let's access this. And that is the form we have configured. And you can see that price is automatically used as a number, because whatever the value you configured inside it, it will take that value there. Right here, we have name, we have price, we have stock. You can put some default values into this. You can see here. So name is TV. So here city is Hyderabad, and stock is true. By default, you configured some values into it. Then usually those values will be updated here. Those values will be binded to the control. Now how to access this data and use it? How to access the data and use it? Suppose I want to access and use in the UI. In the UI, if you want to access here, suppose here I will put product details. And how do we access the details? That means here I will put data list, data term. So I want name. How to access the name now? Previously, how we access it? FRM register. In FRM register, that is the form. FRM register dot value na. FRM register dot value. Value is an object. That object returns all the fields and values. In that we have name field. We are accessing the name field. That means I am accessing the name field. So here I am typing here. You see TV will come here. We are accessing the name field and it is going to access and display that there. Now I am changing this here. You can see it will display there. Samsung TV something. It will access and display. Now tell me how to access the child form details. So we'll do one thing. To make it better in the UI, I will just keep a div and class as row, and here we will define the class as column and class as col3. Let me keep all this entire form in that column 3, and this part in column, right? Here I will put a div, the class as col9. Means just we are displaying the details side by side, nothing special. So here I want to get another data term, that is price. How to access the price? So we have to use FRM register dot value dot price. Now how to access the city? To access the city, here you have FRM register dot value dot, in that we have FRM stock. In that FRM stock we have city. That is the hierarchy now. How you can access that city. That means you need to access in this way. Now here I am accessing the city, right? The same thing. Suppose I want to access the stock. That means data term stock and data definition. So here FRM register, in that we have value, in that FRM stock, in that we have stock. It can get the value true or false and display there. It will get true or false. I am changing the name, some Nike casuals. I am entering some price. I am adding some city here. And I am selecting this, it will display. Submitting everything same. That means on submit we have to collect the data. How we will send on submit FRM register dot value. FRM register dot value will get all the details. Now to handle the child forms controls, this is lengthy. Can you tell any shortcut technique for this? You observe here, to access this city, I have to refer to this form. After that second form, then we have to access city. Can you tell any shortcut technique to directly access city? In JavaScript or TypeScript, what you can do to access the city directly? We can use accessors. Am I right? We can use accessors, right? Good, right. We can use accessors. We can use accessors. In JavaScript, you might have learned about getter and setter accessors. By using accessors, you can get that. For example, how do we do get, what is it? City. City is an accessor. City is an accessor. Now what this accessor have to do? It should return. It should return. This city accessor have to return. What it should return? It should return FRM register, this dot FRM register dot FRM stock, FRM stock. In that FRM stock, we have to return, what is another one? City or something we can configure. And it is not enough actually. In that what we have to do is, we have to define as written as what type, you have to tell it. You have to define it written as form control or form array, form element, like that. Then it will be easy. I will tell you a very shortcut technique. We will use accessor, but this is not the right way. How to use accessors, I will tell you in an example. Because if any developer will see your code here, he will say this is not good. This is working fine. There is no problem in this. But if any developer will see this, he will not satisfy, because he will ask you why you are allocating memory newly every time. That means every time you are allocating memory for every control. This is not good. If you are allocating memory for every control like this newly every time, that means what data it is having previously, the next time that data will be gone, because every time memory is new. Then if I want to access the data between requests, that means the previous what they submitted, now what they submitted, we have to depend on lot of state management techniques to store the data previous and get the current data and use it. So reactive forms, this is okay, working fine, but this is not good idea. This is not good idea because you are allocating memory newly for every element, every group, every time. If you are doing this, that means whenever you call this name, automatically it will allocate memory. Every time new memory is allocated whenever you are trying to use it. This is very risky. So that means memory will be overloaded. But this is good for what kind of forms? This is good for what kind of forms? If you remembered, I told you difference between static and non-static, right? In TypeScript, we discussed about static and non-static. So this is good for discrete forms. This is non-static type na. That means it is good for discrete forms. Discrete forms means every time after you finish using the form, the data is cleaned up. Every time when you call the form, the data will be new. Memory will be newly allocated. But I want a continuous form because I am trying to handle operations like insert, update, delete, continuous form. The data should be available continuous. It should not reallocate again and again. Then this is not good idea. This is good for what kind of forms? Discrete. Discrete forms are disconnected forms. That means after you finish using, next time when you call a form, the memory is new. Right? We need to use continuous forms. To use continuous forms, there is another option. We call it as form builder. We have to use a form builder. Form builder. Let's see. First, this example I will give you. The basic example means how to submit. No need to tell. You can handle now. For example, I am giving on submit. Okay. On submit, what we have to do? We have to collect the data. Collect the data, any type. Okay. Now we will use alert JSON.stringify and whatever data comes. Okay. Now what we are doing here is we will go to the HTML. On submit, we have to collect. Form submitting is same. What you have to do here, we have to write submit. On submit, we have to collect on submit. Into that we need to send the data frm register dot value. You have to send it. Now whatever data you entered, it should submit the data. That means obviously you are collecting the data. Okay. And price, everything is defined here. And now I click register. It will get all the data and display. That means whatever the data present in the form, child form, everything will come here. This is same. There is no change in this, right? That means only the point how you design the form, how you bind the form, these are the changes. And very important, your UI is very clean. There is no complexity much. But problem, what you identified, every time memory is newly allocated. That is the problem for this. So this is discrete form. How you can design a discrete form. So that means discrete is disconnected approach. So for the reactive form, reactive demo.component.ts. But before this, one more you have to do now. app.module.ts. Here you have to import this. In app module, you have to import reactive form module from Angular Forms. This is compulsory. So, and we have to write in imports. In imports, we need to define reactive forms module. You need to specify this. Second, you can add this into the TS file. This is all we are adding into the TS file. Right. Next we have reactive demo dot component dot HTML, and here we are adding all this logic. This is fine. Now what is problem in this? Already I told you. Now how to overcome this problem? Simple. UI will not change. UI will be same. Only the point, the approach of designing the form will change. What you can do is, now I will remove this. I will remove this. And I will use a service called Form Builder. Form Builder is a service. If I say Form Builder is a service, you know how to implement service. How to implement service? We have to first use the Form Builder, and into the constructor we need to inject it, right? Private some Form Builder. It is of what type? Form Builder type. That means it uses a singleton pattern. Now what we have to do? We have to create FRM register is equal to, so it is this dot FB Form Builder. Form Builder will have important classes. The Form Builder service, it have three classes. So one is we have a group method, another one we have a control method, another one we have say an array method. Three options are there. Now group is used to create a form and control is used to create a control. Array is used to maintain a list of controls which you can add and remove dynamically. If you want to dynamically add and remove controls, then you can design by using array. Initially, first we will see this. The Form Builder dot group, we have group. This group contains one is first one name. Name is what type? Name is what type? This dot FB dot, it is control type. It is control type and it is having some value. There is no validators as of now. Another one is price. What is it? This dot FB dot control, and this is 0. And we have another option, that is FRM stock. FRM stock, this dot FB dot, it is again a group. In this group, again we have city, and city is this dot FB dot, it is control, and this control is empty. And another option, stock, this dot FB dot control, and this is true or false. I am configuring like this. Same thing, but what you noticed here, I am not using new memory. I am not using new memory because the memory is allocated for the form at the time of creating the component. At the time of creating the component, the form is allocated with memory, and the same memory is used here. Across any number of requests, the same component memory will be used. So memory is not newly allocated. What we were doing previously we were allocating memory new group, new control. The UI is same. There is no change in the UI. UI is same. You can see the same UI because same controls we are using here, and you can see the functionality here. I am entering the details. It is same. There is no change in the functionality. Functionality is also working. But these types of forms are good. They are good when you are doing continuous operations. When you are doing continuous operations like insert, update, delete, then this is good. These kind of actions are good because what is the advantage is they can easily take the previous data and continue with the next. Every time when form is newly allocated, that is button. But those kind of forms are required in some occasions, because what we do, we design a form in such a way that once they finished using the form, its data is cleaned up. For example, you have like login, right? For login, you better design a simple form, because means with a discrete approach, because after he login, then we clean up all the details used for login, any secure details he entered, like passwords, like security tokens, OTP, we clean up. Later we will maintain them in a session state and use that and handle it. Later I will show you that how to handle such cookies or sessions, we can use them. Initially, what is the difference here you found is, instead of newly allocating memory, we can inject into the component memory. It uses the component memory and it will continue your data across requests. That is the advantage of form builder. Now the question here is how it can submit only specific portion of data. That's what we discussed. We discussed that reactive forms can be asynchronous. Asynchronous means they can submit only specific portion. Suppose without disturbing name and price, I want to submit only this part. That means only stock details need to be updated without submitting the other details. Only these details need to be updated. Or I need to update only name and city. That means one from the parent form, another from the child form. You can do that. You can update that. Generally, for that we use a concept called, actually, if you want to update only specific portion of the page, you can write here. Suppose here I am writing, so on update, I am using on update. On update, what we can do is we can access this .frm register. In this, we can use a method called, so we have patch value. Patch value is a method. This patch value method advantage is it can update only few details that you want. That means I want it to update only name. Okay. What should be the name? We can define a name, Samsung LED TV, like this. That is the new name we want to update. After that, I want to update from FRM stock. In FRM stock, I want to update. In FRM stock, again, field. In that, what I need to update? I want to update, suppose city. So city, I want to update as Hyderabad. That means I am not updating all details. I am updating name and city only. So is it able to submit and update only those details? Yes, it can do that. What you can do is we can put a method here. So that means we can put a button here. And for the button, I am giving update. And this is also submit button only. Class, BTN, success. This is also submit button. But here we will define click. On click, which action it will do? On click, it will use on update. It will access that on update. Now what happens here is, when I am entering this update, I am clicking that update. Suppose you see, there may be Samsung TV, or says there may be Nike casuals like this. There may be different price. There may be different city and stock. When I click update, you can observe that only those details are updated. You can see the update is changing Samsung. Right? Actually, I entered Nike casuals, but it is updated with these details. Updated with these details. So that means it is updating those details. I selected city as Delhi, but it is Hyderabad. And of course, I click OK. Those details are pushed into here. without disturbing the other details. Without disturbing the other details, it can update only the details that you want. If you are sending into API, then it will update only those two details without submitting the entire. That makes it asynchronous. How you can update only specific portion? For that we have to use another option. What is it? Patch value. So by using patch value, you can update only specific portion of the form. So you can get this patch value and update only specific portion of the form, right? So this is basically how reactive form works. But here the key point is this array. Array means how you can extend the form, add new controls into the form, remove controls from the form dynamically. Dynamically extending the form is the key point. So that we'll see in our next session. Tomorrow we'll do that. So tomorrow we will learn how form can be extended and validated. With that we can finish that forms concept. Then we will go into routing, right? Another important point. Tomorrow we will see two things: how to extend a form and how validate reactive forms. These two parts we will see that, right? Tomorrow we'll continue.